This is chapter 28 of the audio version of Stories of the Gospels, a book written and copyrighted by Daniel Limpinall. Every believer who decides to follow Jesus will encounter Christians who refuse to accept their faith in Christ. And they will also be confronted with other kinds of cynical people and many others who believe in other religions. In Jesus' day, the Pharisees were only one such group of cynical people. They were Bible experts who methodically controlled the actions of the nations through the rule of law. They claimed the rule of law was from God and used violence and punishment to control every part of worship and culture. Ironically, the Pharisees were themselves harassed by their Roman overseers. For all their boasting, their rule of law was only protected by the Roman emperor in order that peace would be maintained and the taxes would support the Roman Empire. But the peace was rare, and there were constant violent struggles between Jewish factions and the Roman government. The Jews constantly but futilely believed that God would drive out the Romans. Each new believer in Jesus had to make choices every day how to handle all these pressures according to the teachings of Jesus. Believers today are faced with similar pressures. Jesus spent considerable time teaching believers how to handle these pressures. Everyone is like a homeless person and needs a sheepfold. Pressures can cause anyone to perceive good people to be evil and evil people to be good, or harmless people a threat. Jesus explained that every human has a vital need to be saved. Everyone needs a sheepfold and a shepherd, and the shepherd's job is different from the sheep. Never before has God's word been so alive. Enjoy a living experience of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Stories of the Gospels, chapter 28, Challenges of Following Jesus, part 3. Jesus explains the vital human need to be saved. During the days of ancient Israel, when the nation fell upon hard times, people could lose their properties. Some would become heavily in debt and could not pay their creditors, and others would not have sufficient cash to purchase the food and supplies they needed to survive. People who had lots of cash would purchase these properties. The payment eased the burdens of the depression the sellers experienced. For the purpose of this story, if an investor purchased a farm with many sheep, he would make sure the sheep are cared for properly. He would find a shepherd to look after the sheep, take them to pasture, water them, and make sure they were protected in a sheepfold at night. If he doesn't take care of the sheep, they would die, run off, or be stolen. Sheep don't have many ways to protect themselves. They need a shepherd to be safe. The threats to a sheep are great: wild animals, human thieves, or bad decisions. Sheep don't often live through their bad decisions. If they are lost, the investor would experience a financial loss. Following is a teaching of Jesus that emphasizes our human need to be safe, provided for, find fulfillment, and to be confident of a reward in heaven that lasts forever. After all, your life doesn't end when you die. Jesus used the term saved as one word to describe all of these vital human needs. Someone asked Jesus a very common question that people wonder about every day. The question prompted Jesus to begin teaching. They said, "Sir, are only a few people going to be saved?" Meaning, are only a few people going to figure out they need God's protection today, tomorrow, and in eternity? Jesus didn't directly answer that question. Instead, he spoke about how we are saved, or what we are saved from. What is it that a person needs protected from? What value can be added to a person's existence for the near future or before they die? How does eternity hold the ultimate prize for any person who is born? Jesus began to teach. At its root, everyone's need for protection is similar to a homeless person. No one wants to live in a glass house without privacy because no one wants other people second guessing their actions and choices. Furthermore, everyone needs to live without threats. This is the basic reason for a house, or if you were a sheep, the walls of a sheepfold. Sheep will follow the shepherd from one green pasture to another all day, but at night the shepherd ushers them into the sheepfold. A good shepherd will make sure the sheep are kept from dangers. This is vitally important because if your life or mine experiences constant dangers and threats, our minds can break down and we gradually lose a realistic view of what is safe. We may even believe the actions of our enemies are necessary. Being homeless isn't the only lifestyle with dangers. Anyone traveling is always at risk from bandits or accidents. I spend many nights outside when my disciples and I travel between Galilee and Jerusalem. But people with mental challenges are also very susceptible to dangers, and there are countless other dangers like abusive homes, abusive bosses, abusive churches, uncaring law enforcement, or uncaring healthcare providers, to name only a few. The human mind is fragile, and no human is qualified to assume a person's mental strength or predict how they are affected by some event or circumstance. With the right pressures, any mind can perceive good people to be evil and evil people to be good, or harmless people to be a threat. When this becomes commonplace, a deception settles over the whole culture, and people begin to question everything, even things that are healthy and safe. A sheepfold is needed for sheep. Humans also need a place so they can experience truly secure boundaries so their mind can rest. When a person truly lives in security and peace, their confidence in life begins to increase, and they eventually begin to identify doable opportunities they can choose that will bring them satisfaction without undue pressure. Can you imagine living in a place where these evil traits exist with no ending and no resolution? Generational homelessness is a real circumstance, as is other physical, mental, and cultural situations. But consider hell, where there are never-ending conditions of death, physical and mental terrors, isolation, torture, and abandonment. Hell is simply the worst human existence possible without a day to rest in peace. People of all ways of life are homeless in a sense. Every way of life experiences death, sorrow, various physical and mental traumas, isolation, cruelty, and abandonment. But consider two extremes. A couple buys their dream home, a 50-room mansion, and a prostitute has 50 partners. Each considers their choices as the right thing to bring them satisfaction and a confident outlook. They may even believe their choices are safe. Yet each of these lifestyles can experience hell on earth because the truth is, the repercussions of our lifestyle choices are not always the reason our existence is so hard. Any group of sheep, like any human, also needs protection, security, and good options, or they will become sickly, worn down, and depressed. Every human is threatened by many different conditions on earth, but those threats are not merely from the real or visible world. The most treacherous threats come from the world that cannot be observed through the 5 or even 6 human senses. Science cannot appreciate the unseen world because science is limited to the 5 human senses. Science, however, can appreciate the vast array of threats to life on earth. Its observation understands that human choices have more impact on the natural world than the natural world has on humans. God knows that human choice is the reason for all evil on the earth. One sin causes much evil, but not just for the sinner, but in some way for every other human on earth. God also knows that mankind's greatest adversary is Satan, not for what Satan makes people do, but for what he tricks them into thinking. He knows how humans think, and he makes constant temptations against our human weaknesses. The results should be easily recognized. Every person on earth needs a safe place to dwell, rest, grow, and expand. Like sheep, people need the right shepherd and a sheepfold. Jesus explained, the sheepfold by necessity has a narrow door. It's not a broad door because that would easily let thieves and fakers into the sheepfold. The door to the sheepfold must be big enough to permit a useful, pleasurable, and fulfilling lifestyle, and small enough to provide protection, stability, and growth. This balance, or modest life, can only be truly maintained by the right shepherd. When a sheep or a person begins to identify unsafe conditions as acceptable, it is truly an extraordinary feat to reintroduce them to a life that is truly safe. And to accomplish this, only enough of the correct kind of help will fully restore them. Here's the key to real help. All help offered must truly provide security, and the help must not lead to any other threats, such as threats to freedom, self-government, doable jobs, etc. Plus, there has to be do-overs, like turns that don't count. But who is capable to offer this kind of help? Jesus added, so you may think this is all too good to be true. In truth, it is impossible for even wealthy and powerful people to achieve this for themselves. They vainly attempt to isolate themselves from dangers and threats. But I, the Messiah, have come to make all things new, to make the impossible possible, to lead you to a place where boundaries never constrain to harm or suppress, but create a resting place that makes one free to enjoy all I have made for them. Of course, you must believe that I am that good shepherd, or what I am teaching will have no effect. If you cannot follow me, your life will only experience imaginary pleasures and safety. These imaginary things produce calamities to shake these false mental views. Jesus continued, still talking about sheepfolds. Thieves and fakers try to steal the sheep for themselves, make them confused or fearful, or trick them to believe the shepherd has abandoned them. Believe me, I am the door to the sheep. I can guarantee that many will try to enter, but they won't succeed because they are not my sheep. When an investor is choosing to acquire more sheep for his property, he doesn't ask the sheep, are you a sheep? That's silly. A sheep doesn't know it is a sheep. A sheep never considers its DNA, but it obeys the DNA without question. So the shepherd only has to identify sheep. But what makes a sheep a sheep? A sheep doesn't care about its vulnerability until the threat can be seen and identified, usually too late to avoid the consequences. Then it is terrified, confused, and makes rash decisions. Additionally, a sheep will wander aimlessly between various things that attract its attention, without considering if there are dangers close. It will graze over a snake hole, or it may wander into thick brush that catches its wool and traps it. It will reach over the side of a cliff for a blade of grass and lose its balance and fall over the cliff. A sheep will also overconsume the provisions in one field without considering if the land can sustain the grazing of the sheep. When a sheep finally fails to see any more provisions, or when it gets trapped, only then does it begin to cry out to God for help, little knowing whether a wolf is nearby or not. The other sheep nearby immediately are transformed into spectators that turn and stare at the familiar cry, but without power to know what to do. It's the shepherd's job to gather his sheep so that the sheep's DNA doesn't bring them or their neighbors harm. If the sheep doesn't trust the shepherd, it will run away. It is the shepherd's job to become skilled at gathering even the most distrustful of sheep. It is also the shepherd's job to make sure no other creature puts on a disguise in order to get into the sheepfold and take advantage of the sheep or try to steal one. These fakers cause sheep many problems. Jesus said, my sheep are in the sheepfold. I make sure of that. But still there are some who are distrustful of me and won't let me save them from their circumstances and bring them into the fold. Once a sheep enters my fold, it may take some time for them to relax, trust me, and get to know my voice. These can get turned around and wonder if they are on the wrong side of the door. But I know my sheep. After the gate is closed to the sheepfold, the gatekeeper is not going to open it for anyone. He won't open it for a faker sheep or for anyone. He will only open it for the shepherd. When the shepherd opens the door, the sheep will follow him out for a pleasant day in the sun. They will not worry about what they will eat or what the latest fashions are. They will skip and jump and romp and play. The proud will scold them for acting like children. But that is what my sheep are, my children, and I love them and give my life for them. Luke chapter 13, verses 23 through 30. Thank you for listening. Be sure to press the like button and subscribe. God willing, I will publish another chapter every Wednesday. Tell your friends about your experience listening to stories of the Gospels, and let your comments tell many more, and me too. I trust you sensed God's presence during the story. You know only our guilt keeps us from God. So confess your sin and have confidence in God. He will forgive you and cleanse you. He wants to experience life together with you. One of the most important but forgotten aspects of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that it is to be demonstrated, not merely preached. You can do this by sharing. If you don't share otherwise, you can share with others by giving to my ministry by going to my channel and clicking the donate button on the banner image at the top.